I never thought that Christmas dinner could change my life so drastically. But here I am, Vanessa. I'm 28 years old and I'm still trying to figure out what happened that evening in that cozy living room of my childhood, saturated with the smell of cinnamon, pine needles, and something subtly disturbing that was spreading in the air like smoke from a dying flame with every passing moment. Hope. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. It all started quite normally. I, as always, came to my parents' house with a bottle of red, tart, with a slightly noticeable cherry note of wine, and with a still warm, generously sprinkled with cinnamon homemade apple pie, which invariably caused Dad to approve, as soon as he caught its aroma at the door, as if confirming that family traditions are more than just repetitive actions. They are rituals imbibed from mother's milk, rooted deep in the heart. When I entered, the house was already filled with voices, laughter, outbursts of emotion, the hum of conversations and the clink of cutlery coming from the kitchen, where my mother, in her invariable red apron with reindeer, commanded the cooking process with that inimitable enthusiasm that always inspired even the laziest family member to get serving napkins or peeled potatoes. I greeted her, giving her hugs, catching glances filled with warmth and curiosity, and only then did I notice Paula, my younger sister, always curling around her own reflection, with her rebellious spirit, purple, dyed hair and endless disregard for family gatherings. She really came, and it was almost incredible how if it had suddenly started raining instead of snowing on Christmas morning. She usually skipped our evenings on the pretext that she couldn't stand older relatives talking about bad knees, high blood pressure, and miraculous dietary supplements found on the vast expanses of the internet, but that evening she sat at the head of the table, smiling as if she was preparing to announce something fateful to the world. When everyone was seated, and Dad's knife began to slide across the golden crust of the turkey with the usual ceremony, when Mom solemnly handed over a bowl with her signature, slightly sweet cranberry sauce, and Uncle Giuseppe was already draining his second glass of wine with the air of a man who has long understood everything, I began to feel some strange tension, as if in a thick and invisible chord rang in everyday life. And so, as if according to a script, Mom cleared her throat, looked at Paula with that elusive, slightly strained smile that I think I've never seen before, and narrowed her eyes and said, "Paula, honey, why don't you tell everyone about the business that you want to open?" I was just enjoying a juicy piece of turkey when Paula, squaring her shoulders and shining her eyes, spoke with such infectious confidence that I almost choked. "Oh, my God, yes, I have this amazing plan. I'm going to buy clothes in China, very cheap, really high quality things, and sell them here at a good profit." I almost dropped my fork. Paula starts a business. My sister, who hasn't worked a single day since she graduated from college 2 years ago, who spent most of her time meditating in Bali, searching for her inner voice, and doing endless Instagram photo shoots in the mirrors of various cafes, now, suddenly, a businesswoman. Before I had time to think about what I had heard properly, a storm of delight broke out in the room. Uncle Giuseppe, raising his glass, loudly proclaimed a toast to our future successful businesswoman. Aunt Marta, clasping her hands, lamented that she had always known Paula had talent, and the cousins, as if by agreement, had already started asking about family discounts. But what really made everything go cold inside me was the look that Mom and Dad exchanged, the same parental, studying, guilty in advance, and at the same time confident that they had already made some important decision and were just looking for a convenient moment to voice it. And now it's here. "You're going to help your sister start a business, aren't you, dear?" Mom said it in such a sweetly enveloping voice that it took my breath away. "After all, you have these savings for an apartment." I choked on the mashed potatoes, abruptly reached for water, trying to digest not only the food, but also this sudden news. What? Why me? Why can't she get a business loan like all normal people? My voice was trembling, but there was still hope for reason in it. There are banks that help aspiring entrepreneurs. She just needs to show a business plan, I continued, but a wave of voices drowned out my words. Uncle Giuseppe was already talking about some family debt. Aunt Marta recalled how her sister had once saved her with a much smaller sum, and the cousins nodded in time. Like mechanical toys. "Think about it, Dear, Mom has already taken me into the ring of voices. When Paola's business goes up, she will give you everything with interest, and you will be able to buy the most luxurious apartment in the city. They didn't stop talking for 15 minutes, and every time I tried to object, another phrase filled with guilt or reproach pushed me further away from common sense. Exhausted, crumpled, and mentally exhausted, I finally looked down and whispered, "Well, I'll help Paola with the money." There were cheers at the table, as if I had just announced that I had won a ticket to paradise for everyone, and Paola was beaming, surrounded by everyone's congratulations, and her smug smile pierced me like a needle in my heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a terrible mistake. A week after that fateful Christmas dinner, I was sitting at my desk at work, against the background of a gray, silent office, where the only sound was the barely audible hum of ventilation, and my fingers were unconsciously tapping on the keys while my eyes wandered senselessly over the lines of the next report, not perceiving the meaning, when suddenly my phone rang, and I jerked out of her half-asleep stupor. She automatically picked it up to see a screen on which a short but unpleasantly meaningful message from Paola was glowing. "Hi, little sister. I hope you haven't forgotten your promise to help with my business. I've done all the calculations, and I need $33,000 to get started. When can you transfer them?" I stared at these lines with such disbelief, as if the phone wasn't showing me a message, but an absurd joke that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at, and for at least 5 minutes I just stared at the screen without blinking, feeling my coffee, forgotten on the side, getting cold, accurately reflecting my inner freezing. $33,000. I reread it over and over again, trying to convince myself that I had seen it wrong, that the extra digit had crept in by accident, as it happens when the hands type faster than the head works. But, alas, the figure stood clearly and confidently, as a challenge to my common sense. "Paola, that's a lot of money. Why do you need so much?" I wrote this, trying to remain calm, although my fingers were trembling slightly, and my heart was beating with an annoying frequency, foreshadowing trouble. The answer came almost immediately. "I know what I'm doing, Vanessa. I've calculated everything very carefully. 10,000 for the initial inventory, 5,000 for the deposit for the store and rent for the first month, 5,000 for repairs, 5,000 for marketing and advertising, 5,000 for the salary of employees for the first month, plus a little for unexpected expenses. Don't worry, I promise to pay you back within 6 months. You know me, I always keep my promises." I sat up straight, as if pushed away by this paragraph, and with a heavy heart, feeling a wave of despair rising inside, I opened the banking application, not so much because I believed in her plan, but because I didn't know how to get out of it now, because failure would mean a new avalanche of persuasions, reproaches, family scenes, and another accusation of callousness. I pressed the transfer button, watched as the numbers disappeared from my account, as the dreams of my own apartment, for which I denied myself everything, dissolved. I declined invitations to parties, did not go shopping just for fun, took on additional projects, sat up at night for reports, and all this for the sake of one dream, which my younger sister was now boldly flushing down the drain, like last year's snow. I sent her a short message: "The money is in your account." Almost instantly, the answer came: "Oh my God, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are the best sister in the world. I'll make you proud, I promise." I put the phone screen down and leaned back in my chair, trying not to think, but the memories came flooding back, as if someone had opened a long-locked childhood box. Scenes surfaced where I, then still a teenager, asked my parents for new sneakers for the school team, but I heard my mother, sighing, saying that money is tight right now. And it wasn't until a week later that I saw Paola getting a brand new iPhone because she was going through a difficult period. Or the time when I begged to be enrolled in piano lessons, dreaming of music as breathing, and Dad, looking away, said it was too expensive. But a month later Paola went to horse riding lessons because she needed to develop in a diverse way. And it happened over and over again. Not only our parents, Uncle Giuseppe always slipped her money at family gatherings, whispering to her that she reminded him of himself in his youth, as if it were the highest compliment. Aunt Marta sent her birthday checks twice as much as mine, explaining that Paola was still young. She needed more, of course, Even our cousins seemed to be drawn to her naturally, like to a magnet, attracted by her infectious laughter and endless stories full of dramatic twists, as if she were the main character of a family telenovela. And no matter what she did, she lied that she hadn't broken Mom's favorite vase, took money from Dad's wallet, ran away from school to a party. There was always someone who justified her behavior, saying, well, she's just energetic, or she's still young, she'll outgrow it, or my personal favorite, at least she's honest about what she wants. I remember how my best friend Fulvia Bernardi once came to school in a new leather jacket, a gift from her grandmother, beautiful, light, with a soft sheen of genuine leather, and how a shadow of jealousy flashed in Paola's eyes at that moment, fleeting, but distinct. The next day, during lunch break, I saw Paola sneaking to Fulvia's locker, but I didn't pay attention, although I probably should have. The next morning, Fulvia came to school crying. Her jacket was ruined. It was covered with permanent marker and something sticky, like nail polish. I immediately realized who did it. The varnish was exactly the same color as the one that stood on Paola's chest of drawers in the evening. But before Fulvia could say anything, Paola threw a tantrum in the hallway, sobbing loudly that Fulvia was going to slander her, that she had always been cruel to her, and that it hurt her when she was accused of something she had not done. And everyone, as if by magic, sided with her. It was all a lie, but Paola always knew how to cry on command, as if she was the very actress she once wanted to be, easily causing tears, instantly changing intonations, making any scene into a performance in which she was certainly a heroine deserving of sympathy and applause. The first to step in, as expected, was Aunt Marta, a woman who was always burning with righteous anger, and whose affection for Paola seemed to know no bounds. She literally stormed into the school, demanding an urgent meeting with the principal, with her voice trembling with indignation, claiming that her niece would never have committed such a despicable act, and assuring that the whole story was nothing more than slander on the part of another girl, who, according to her, envies Paola and tries to kill her. To frame him. She was joined almost immediately by Uncle Giuseppe, with his booming voice and penchant for theatrics, then by our cousins, one after the other, with expressions of indignation on their faces, as if they really knew the whole truth, and finally by Mom and Dad, who, instead of listening to me or at least trying to look at me objectively, we stood shoulder to shoulder with the entire outraged crowd, rallying around Paola as if we were protecting an innocent lamb from a pack of wolves. I listened as they discussed this situation over and over at the family table, hypothesizing that Fulvia was just jealous of Paola, that she was probably offended that I was spending more time with my sister than with her, and that Paola was having a hard time because she was constantly being envied. I tried to speak. I wanted to say that I saw Paola at Fulvia's locker that day, but Mom immediately interrupted me, abruptly, coldly, with that reproach in her voice that makes everything cringe inside. Vanessa, how could you even think that your sister would do something like that? The family sticks together. Everything got out of control. Our relatives continued to come to school, complained to the teachers, interfered in conversations with the parents of other children, especially Fulvia's family, making such a fuss that in the end Fulvia's mother decided to transfer her daughter to another school, unable to withstand this pressure and constant reproaches from people anymore who believed blindly and fiercely. I lost my best friend then, the only person I could talk to about everything without fear of being ridiculed or judged, and Paola got away with it, as she always does. She even had the audacity, no, the courage, no, the inexpressible coldness, to smile at me when we heard that Fulvia was leaving, and to whisper in the hallway, leaning slightly into my ear, with chilling anger, "This is what happens to people who treat me badly." I didn't tell anyone what she said to me, because why? Who would believe me? Paola was the youngest, adored, protected, the one who is still growing up, who can make mistakes, to whom everything is forgiven. And now, 15 years later, naively, I was still hoping that something had changed. That maybe she had matured. That maybe this business story, her first serious step, will be the moment when she finally takes responsibility for her actions, shows that she is able to build something of her own, not destroying someone else's, not manipulating, not lying, but simply, honestly, albeit with mistakes. I hoped that she would prove to everyone that she was worthy of all these years of boundless faith in her potential. The following weeks flew by in a blur. I was drowning in deadlines, endless meetings, schedules, and meetings, immersed in the implementation of a major software implementation project that required maximum concentration, and I had almost no time to think about Paula, about money, about her great entrepreneurial endeavor. So one day, on Sunday, as usual, I came to my parents for our regular dinner. Dad, sitting on the couch, watched baseball with that absent-minded concentration that he never deigned to talk to me. Mom was in the kitchen just taking lasagna out of the oven, fragrant with cheese and oregano, but Paula was nowhere to be found. It was visible. "Where's Paula?" I asked, helping my mom set the table, and tried to keep my voice casual and concerned, even though my anxiety was already growing inside. Mom, without even turning around, waved her hand dismissively, as if she were talking about someone else. "Oh, she went on a trip." I almost dropped the plate. "A trip? What do you mean, a trip? She should be starting her own business." Mom turned around sharply. Her gaze became prickly. Her voice was firm. "Don't talk to me like that, Vanessa. This is a business trip, obviously. And honestly, you need to stop poking your nose into your sister's business. She knows what she's doing." I bit my tongue, even though everything inside was screaming, everything was rushing out: frustration, anger, fear, confusion. But I silently finished setting the table, because I knew that any word would turn into an accusation, into another quarrel, into another crack that would divide us even more. But that night, lying in my apartment, under the weight of insomnia and anxiety, I opened Instagram and started scrolling through Paula's profile, and everything inside me stopped. In the photos posted over the course of 1 week, she posed in front of the Eiffel Tower in a designer dress, sipped cappuccino in a Roman cafe overlooking the Colosseum, shopped in Milan surrounded by bags from boutiques, and danced on the beach in some luxury club on an island in Greece. Each post was more extravagant than the previous one, each was provocative, without the slightest trace of a business trip. "What the hell?" I muttered, staring at the screen, which reflected not reality, but carefully filtered lies, and I could barely fall asleep that night, tossing and turning in bed with the same question in my head: if she's building a business with Chinese suppliers, then why is she wandering around Europe? And as soon as I saw a new photo in the feed the next morning with the caption "Returned home," I knew what I had to do. I called her. "Hi, little sister," I said, trying to keep my voice level, calm, without unnecessary notes of irritation, although a storm of doubts, premonitions, and growing anxiety boiled inside me. Her voice was light and cheerful, as if nothing had happened, as if less than a week had passed since she disappeared without explanation with the money intended to start her so important business project. "How are you? How was your trip?" I asked, swallowing the tension, trying to make my words sound neutral, not rushing into accusations. She laughed her usual carefree laugh, ringing, sincere, but at the same time artificial, like a bell in a set, and said, "Oh, my God, that was amazing. Don't worry, I've thought it all out. I actually met with this incredible clothing supplier in Europe. They would be perfect for my business." I heard something important slowly but surely begin to shrink inside me, as if something I had been trying to trust all this time was beginning to collapse under the weight of another contradiction, because I could no longer contain the skepticism in my voice and, raising my intonation a little, asked, "European suppliers? I thought you were going to import from China, because that was your whole business plan, Paula." She replied without batting an eye, "Plans are changing, Vanessa. You know, you have to be flexible in business. Trust me, I know what I'm doing." I took a deep breath so as not to lose my temper, and, gathering all my strength, I said, "Okay. So when will I be able to see the store, the one you said you already found?" There was a pause in response, barely noticeable, but still long enough for her confusion to be obvious. "Oh, give me a week to get everything ready. I'll show you, I promise." Something in her voice made me goosebumps, the same shade of lightness with which she always lied without thinking. But I restrained an inner tremor and said, "Great." I want to see the store in a week. Sure, no problem, she replied. The message with the address arrived on Saturday evening. The mall was located on the outskirts of the city, in an area I usually didn't go to, too far from the center, too gray and quiet, as if everything that came here had lost its luster. When I pulled into the parking lot, the first thing that caught my eye was my parents' car, neatly parked next to the entrance. Sure. Paula has never done anything without the support of her personal group of admirers. The space turned out to be small, but well organized. Clothes were neatly hung on racks along the walls, a pair of mannequins in stylish dresses on the catwalk, soft light, even a cozy seating area in the corner with a coffee machine that smelled of freshly ground grain. Everything looked perfect, even too perfect, as if it wasn't a store, but a set for a movie about a fashion startup. Isn't it wonderful? Paula spun around the room, choking with delight. Look at these things that I got from my supplier. She pointed to a rack of dresses, each piece as if from a picture, fabric flowing between her fingers, labels with the names of European designers that I knew from catalogs. And there's going to be an accessories department here, and I'm thinking of putting a makeup stand over there. Mom wiped the corners of her eyes with a napkin, too slowly, too theatrically, and said, sobbing, "My baby is a real businesswoman. I always knew there was something about you, honey, unlike some people," she added softly, but loudly enough for me to hear, and gave me that meaningful look that hid a whole bunch of reproaches, doubts, and accusations. I bit my lip so hard that I felt the metallic taste of blood. $30,000 of my own savings made this path possible, but God forbid anyone should admit it. God forbid anyone should say out loud who actually paid for the rent, repairs, and storefronts. When do you open? I asked, running my palm over a sweater on one of the racks. It was soft, expensive, not what I expected from a project originally based on cheap Chinese imports. Soon. Paula smiled, but the next second she turned the conversation to window dressing and the upcoming photo shoot for advertising posters. Over the next few weeks, I unwittingly followed her social media with an almost painful obsession. Paula at trendy restaurants, Paula at the spa, Paula showing off new shoes, bags, jewelry. Not a single mention of the store. There were no opening announcements, no customer reviews, not even photos from the location, as if the store I saw was just an episode in a play. And then it was Sunday again, my parents' house again, the smell of baked chicken again, my mom's earrings and dad's approving cough, but as soon as I entered, I realized something was wrong. Paula was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and swollen, her hands folded, and her mother was hovering over her with a box of napkins and that expression on her face that always meant she was going to tell her how cruel the world was to her youngest daughter. What happened? I asked, already knowing in advance where all this was leading, because with Paula everything always led to the same place. Oh, Vanessa. Paula gasped, and immediately burst into new tears, strained, noisy, with such despair, as if the judge standing in front of her was not her sister, but the judge deciding her fate. Everything is falling apart, she continued, clutching her head as if she hoped that with this gesture she could hold back the devastating hurricane of events. The supplier has raised prices, the store needs to be renovated before we can open it, and as it turns out, there are still all these permits that I didn't know about before. I need another $20,000, Vanessa, or the whole business will collapse before it even starts. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was too much, beyond the point of absurdity, like a tragicomedy that lasts a lifetime with the same plot. You're kidding, right? I asked, looking at her through laughter that was more hysterical than amused. Another 20,000? And at that moment, Mom gasped, as if I had said something unholy, as if my reaction had betrayed family ties. How can you be so cruel? She exclaimed, leaning towards Paula with the care that I remembered from childhood, the care that I always lacked. Your sister is in crisis. A crisis? I replied, feeling my voice grow colder. She didn't even open the store. Maybe she could show me some business records before asking for more. Receipts. Contracts. Anything besides clothes and promises? Mom cringed, as if I'd hit her instead of just asking a question. I can't believe you don't trust your own sister, she said, and at that moment, Dad, who had been sitting in silence, spoke, his voice heavy and tired, as if he already knew how it would end, but still tried to maintain the illusion of order, after all that we had done for you were made. I looked around the kitchen, which was painfully familiar, the walls that had seen so many quarrels and so many silent insults, Paula's crying eyes, Mom's eyes filled with accusation, and Dad's gaze, extinguished but still oppressive. It was a scene I'd seen 1,000 times as a kid, and I knew how it would end. Always the same. With shaking hands, I took out my phone, opened the banking application with a slipped finger, and another $20,000 disappeared from my account into nowhere. More than half of my savings now officially belonged to Paula. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She choked, and the tears, as if by magic, dried up. Her face lit up with a familiar smile, and she rushed to me, hugging me as if she were hugging a savior angel. You are the best sister in the world. I promise you won't regret it. It's been 2 weeks. I tried to focus on work, on projects, on anything, just not to think about the $50,000 that were no longer there, but during my lunch break, flipping thoughtlessly through Instagram to kill time, I saw this photo, and the hand with the sandwich stood in the air. Paula posed in a room that looked like a cosmetologist's or plastic surgeon's office, with slight swelling on her face, a bandage on her nose, and, no matter how hard she tried to hide it, obvious signs of recent surgery. The caption under the photo read, "The best investment is an investment in your appearance. Mommy, transformation, self-love." My sandwich fell on the table, as if it were not just lunch, but all my faith in common sense, with a dull, insulting sound. $50,000. My 50,000. But she operated on her face, and God knows what else. I feverishly scrolled through her feed, and with each new photo, rage grew in me, not even anger, but an icy, rational awareness of betrayal. Here she is in the designer boutiques of Dubai. Here she is with yoga at sunset in Bali. Here she is with a cocktail in a luxury club in Singapore. Not a word about the store. Not a word about business. No goods, no customers, not even empty posts about the difficulties of entrepreneurship, just a celebration of life at my expense. My hands were shaking, and I could barely hold the phone. I needed proof, not only for my parents, but also for myself, because without it, it would all come down to hysteria, Paula's tears, accusations of jealousy and lack of love. I spent 3 hours searching, called several agencies, before I found David Caputo, a private investigator specializing in financial fraud, and his voice on the phone was calm, confident, like a man who saw everything. His fee turned out to be higher than I expected, but by that time I had already stopped worrying about money. I told him at the first meeting, I need to know everything. Every transaction. Every trip. Every purchase. I need to see where my money has gone. He nodded, silently, as if this wasn't the first time relatives of cheaters had visited him. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. I could barely sleep, hardly ate, and every new notification from Paula on social media caused a sharp spasm in my stomach, either from disgust or fear. And finally, he called and invited me to the office. There was a thick folder on his desk, with the corners neatly folded up, as if he himself was afraid to break her silent accusation. Your sister never intended to start a business, he said without prelude, opening a folder from which lines, numbers, and dates began to crawl out. I've tracked every dollar you've transferred. Do you want to know where they went? I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he began to lay out the documents in front of me, bank statements, checks, flight routes, medical bills. 20,000 were spent on plastic procedures, mostly rhinoplasty and lip augmentation. 15 more are for international trips. Over the past 2 months, she has visited 7 countries. The rest is for shopping, hotels, and restaurants. Not a single payment related to the rental of the store, the purchase of goods or advertising. Not a single one. I felt sick when I heard that, as if everything inside me had shrunk, as if my stomach had decided to turn over in disgust. Not for Paula. I had long accepted that she was who she was, but for myself, for allowing her to enter my life again and destroy everything I've been building for so long. And that store, that neat, too beautiful store, which she showed me as the embodiment of her dreams, it also turned out to be a lie. David pulled the lease agreement out of the folder and, unfolding it in front of me, pointed to the date, 1-day lease. Specifically on the day you visited him. He looked at me without a trace of mockery, with the professional coldness of a man for whom exposing dissection is routine. The clothes were also rented, he continued, and all the items were returned the next day, marked used for window photography. He pushed a folder towards me, thick and tight with pages that contained the weeks of my waiting and the whole essence of the dissection. I've compiled everything into a detailed report: bank records, lease agreements, medical bills, travel documents. It's all here. Your sister committed deliberate fraud. I sat in the chair opposite him for a long time, staring at the stack of evidence, and felt everything slowly sinking inside me: faith in my family, self-confidence, even anger, because fatigue came after it. $50,000. My dream is to have my own house, an apartment with windows to the park, and a kitchen that smells not of despair but of coffee in the morning. Everything disappeared so that Paula could get a new nose, plump lips, and take selfies in translucent dresses somewhere on the beaches of Bali. I could hear laughter from my parents' house as I walked down the driveway, holding the folder in my hands, which had become heavy not only from the paper, but from the significance of what I was going to do. It was Thursday, the day of the traditional family tea party, the perfect moment when everyone is gathered, and no one can say that they did not hear, did not understand, was not aware. I opened the door without knocking, because I wasn't going to ask for permission anymore. As always, there was a lively bustle in the living room. Aunt Marta cooed over her endless gossip, Uncle Giuseppe sat in his armchair, Dad with a newspaper, Mom with a tray and a steaming kettle, cousins poked at phones, and, of course, Paula, in the center of attention, loudly demonstrated something on the screen of her smartphone. I stepped into the room, and my voice cut through the fuss like a knife. Paula, when are you going to return my $50,000? The silence fell instantly. Paula raised her head, flashing the same smile that had saved her from any punishment as a child. Oh, Vanessa, well, you know. I can't right now. All the money is invested in the business. Withdrawing it would destroy everything I've built. You understand, don't you? I laughed, but there was no mirth in that laugh, only bitterness. Built it? How about that rhinoplasty? Or maybe trips to Europe, Dubai, and Bali? Is this your business plan? Paula tried to keep her composure, but her face tightened. Mom stepped forward, frowning. Vanessa, what are you talking about? I silently put the folder down on the coffee table and began to arrange the documents. Here's the receipt for the plastic surgery. Here are your travel bookings. And here's my favorite, the 1-day store lease you showed us. Aunt Marta gasped, Uncle Giuseppe leaned forward, and the cousins looked up from their screens for a moment. Dad spoke slowly, with emphasis, as if he still hoped that this could be turned into a familiar version. I'm sure there's some kind of misunderstanding. Paula is just taking her time. She wants to organize everything properly. She spent my money on a vacation and a new face. I shouted, pointing at the folder. Look at that. I hired a detective. Everything is documented. You were spying on your own sister? Aunt Martha said in a strangled voice, clutching her chest. How could you do such a thing? This is insidious, despicable. I whirled on her. She stole $50,000 from me. Am I being mean here? I looked at all these people who were trying to get the guilt out of me again, and I said, it's okay. If none of you want to see the truth, I'll show it to the judge. I'm suing her for fraud. The room exploded. Paula screamed that I couldn't do this to her. Uncle Giuseppe raged about family loyalty. The cousins were interrupting each other like broken radios. Dad insisted that I sit down and be reasonable. And suddenly Mom started talking. Her voice cut through the chaos. She was smiling, and I recognized that smile. It was an exact replica of the one that always saved Paula: sly, expectant, confident. "You can't sue," she said. "You have no proof that it was a loan. Paula borrowed money from you, didn't she? What will you tell the judge? That you just gave your sister $50,000, and now you want it back? Your father and I certainly won't testify that it was anything else." I smiled. It was not a smile of joy, not a sign of satisfaction, not even a hint of malice. No, it was the slow, tired, but unbending smile of a woman who had finally stopped being afraid of being bad in someone else's story. I took out my phone and opened the messaging app, which had dozens of screenshots waiting in the wings like a carefully constructed defense. I picked it up and, looking straight into my mother's face, said calmly, almost kindly, "Do you mean these messages in which Paula specifically asks me to borrow money to start her business? Where does she explicitly say that she will return everything within 6 months? Are these the same messages that legally confirm that it was not about a gift, but about a loan?" No one answered. I swiped my finger across the screen, showing them one message after another, with dates, amounts, promises, and thanks. All without a single ambiguous word. Then, without saying another word, I gathered the evidence back into the folder and left the house, leaving the door open behind me. The screams broke out behind me again, as they always do in such cases, but I didn't look back because I didn't want to anymore. I expected the trial to be long, unpleasant, confusing, with endless attempts to distort the facts and raise doubts, but the truth, surrounded by documents and equipped with digital footprints, turned out to be too weighty to ignore. Nevertheless, it was Mr. Rodriguez, the owner of the store in that very mall on the outskirts of the city, who dealt the final blow to Paula's attempt to portray herself as a naive entrepreneur. He testified calmly, in a businesslike manner, confidently, like a man who has nothing to hide. "Yes, she rented a room for one day," he said. "She explained that she was shooting a video for a prank for a family, brought racks, mannequins, and clothes with her, installed everything in the morning, and in the evening she carefully packed everything and took it away. I thought it was a little weird, but she paid in advance, and I had nothing to worry about." I was watching Paula's face at that moment. She wasn't crying. She didn't shake her shoulders in hysteria, didn't purse her lips, didn't betray a single emotion. She just sat staring at her immaculately manicured nails, as if what was happening around her was something extraneous to her, beneath her participation. Mom and Dad tried their best to keep her side. Mom went to the podium and, with fake excitement in her voice, began talking about Paula's entrepreneurial spirit, how difficult it is to be a young woman trying to build her own business from scratch, and how she just needs more time and support. Dad talked about Paula's unique perspective on business, her work, and how I might just not understand her approach because I'm too traditional. But none of them could explain the bank statements that showed payments for medical procedures, or a one-day rental agreement, or receipts for tickets to Dubai, Singapore, and Rome, or dozens of messages where Paula clearly and unambiguously wrote that she was borrowing money from me and would return it. When the judge delivered her verdict, her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. The evidence presented demonstrates an obvious intention to mislead and abuse trust. The defendant, Paula Mitchell, is obligated to reimburse the plaintiff for the loan amount of $50,000, as well as to pay an additional $20,000 in compensation for moral damages and expenses incurred in connection with the investigation. And that's when, only then, Paula burst into tears. But this time, no one rushed to her with a handkerchief. Neither Mom, Dad, Aunt Marta, nor Uncle Giuseppe just sat there, amazed at the finality of what was happening. Later, after the trial, I heard from one of my former cousins, "It's amazing how quickly people from the closest ones become exes, that my parents had to take out a loan to help Paula pay off the debt. The money was credited to my account exactly on time, in full. And the very next day, I signed the documents for my new apartment. It wasn't the apartment I'd dreamed of before, not spacious, bright with huge windows overlooking the park. The dream had to be cut short after all the expenses for lawyers, investigators, and the trial. But it was mine, and every square meter of it belonged to me, not to anyone's illusions or expectations. My parents still sometimes call, leave voice messages, where they say with barely restrained tears that I destroyed my family, that I broke my sister's heart. Aunt Marta, as I've heard, is now telling all her friends and neighbors that I turned my back on my blood for money. Uncle Giuseppe cut me out of his will, as if it had ever mattered to me. My cousins blocked me on social media, deleted the photos of us together, as if they wanted to erase my very memory. To them, I'm the villain. A cruel, heartless sister who betrayed poor Paola. An ungrateful daughter who shamed her family. A fierce woman, unable to accept the success of others. But you know what? I'm standing in my apartment, looking through the wide windows at the sunset, and it doesn't matter what they think. Because these are my windows. My silence. My truth. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.